Okay, so I guess we can get started. I will share my screen. And you'll have to allow me to share my screen to my own meeting.
Let me figure it out. One participant can advance sharing option. All participants can share the screen.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
You should be all set.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yes, you're good.
Great. Well, hello everybody, and thanks for joining us for this webinar. As you've heard a little bit about this program already, I'd like to give everybody a more detailed overview of the new program that we've been developing in collaboration with the Heising-Simons Foundation. Before I go any further, I'd like to give all the credit to my co-chairs of TVS, Stars and Milky Way in Local Volume, and the Solar System Science Collaborations. I've been very fortunate to work with them, to have the opportunity to work with them to develop this whole program. And I wanted to draw your attention to the new website that we've just set up, where you can find all of the relevant details, including a recording once this meeting is finished. So for context, I'll start by explaining how this opportunity came about. And it really started with a discussion of the special publication for our survey strategy research. Federica has been really tireless in working to find funding to cover not just the cost of that publication, but all of the work that we do in the science collaborations. But especially for that publication, to make sure everybody would have an opportunity to contribute to it. So following her suggestion, I reached out to a contact that I happened to have at the Heising-Simons Foundation, and I was delighted to get a really positive response. Now, initially, I requested funds just to support the special edition, but the foundation encouraged us to broaden the scope of the proposal and place specific emphasis on the importance of encouraging diversity and equity in science. So naturally, we submitted a broader proposal and included a lot of additional activities that we thought would benefit from funding, and also included a bit more general information, not just about TVS, but about the other science collaborations and Rubin in general. And after reading that, the foundation encouraged us to broaden the proposal again. And this time they specifically invited us to include research by Stars and Milky Way and the solar system collaborations, as well as TVS, as these topics are ones that the foundation has specifically chosen to support in their current programs. And so naturally, we were super happy to do that. And the chairs of all three science collaborations got together to work up on a joint proposal. And as a result of that proposal, I'm delighted to say that they recently awarded us just under $900,000 for this program, which is designed to span 1 year. And the purpose of this meeting is to share the details of that proposal with you. So I wanted to emphasize that the objectives of the program focus on research excellence for Rubin and enabling the science collaborations to perform the kind of preparatory work that we'd like to do in time for the start of survey operations. But the program places equal weight on fostering an equitable and inclusive research environment and overcoming barriers to entry to that research. So there are four main elements to the program, and I want to cover each of these in turn. The first element includes $48,000 to cover the publication charges associated with the original survey strategy special edition paper that we talked about. This element is open to all members of all science collaborations. And the funds also include additional costs to cover the costs of publications of science papers and also roadmap papers for, in the case of TVS and Stars and Milky Way, who haven't yet published those. And so it has also this pool of $8,000 to support other science publications that were developed in the context of these three science collaborations. The second element focused on supporting science collaboration meetings and workshops. Now, of course, in the light of the ongoing travel uncertainty worldwide because of the pandemic, we had to assume that meetings would continue to be virtual only because of the short duration, just 1 year of this program. But even virtual meetings aren't entirely cost-free. So we've requested funds to enable us to use the GatherTown platform for interactive workshops. And that's something I'll come back to shortly. We also requested funds to provide all members with access to software platforms and services. In particular, the Solar System Science Collaboration has a Jupyter Hub system configured for their science needs and offer a cloud-based data storage platform. We intend to expand access to this to members of all 3 science collaborations. And I'd like to thank Mario Urich of the University of Washington for helping us to organize this. But the lion's share of the program is dedicated to running a small grants program, which all members of TVS, Stars Milky Way, and Solar System will be able to apply for in the near future. Specifically, the goals of this program element are to enable science collaboration members to dedicate time to LSST preparations and to ensure that everyone has an equitable opportunity to contribute to those efforts. And I wanted to emphasize that we see both goals as being equally important to this program. We're expecting to allocate about 30 grants of about $20,000 each, $20,000 each, to teams led by members of TVS, Stars and Milky Way, and Solar System. Everyone is eligible internationally, and members of other science collaborations are welcome to collaborate on proposals where their science interests overlap. The grants are going to be allocated by a peer review process, and we'll be recruiting members for a resource allocation committee shortly. The grant includes funds to be able to award the members of the RAC with an honorarium, which is greatly appreciated because I imagine it will be quite a bit of work. We did discuss various alternatives for this particular proposal element with the foundation, including the possibility of whether they could support hiring personnel to work on research topics. Unfortunately, one of the few limitations that we were under with this program was that they were unable to support personnel contracts. So instead we chose to disperse the funds as individual awards. And we felt that this particular option would enable us to support as wide a range of science as possible. Aside from that, the program can be extremely flexible in the kind of proposal that we can support. And we envision a range of proposals from our members. I think it's valuable to go into this in more detail since it's going to be rather different for your more traditional agency style opportunities. First of all, we recognize the huge amount of work that collaboration members have put in already, almost entirely on a voluntary basis for our particular science collaborations. And these contributions are massively beneficial to the whole community and to the Rubin project, but they take time, and sometimes this can come at the expense of a person's research time, and so it has a career cost for them. And in light of the equity goals of this program, we want to recognize and support the many services to the community that our members provide. We're also conscious of allocating the resources in as impactful a way as possible. Now, small grants can be very impactful, particularly at smaller institutions and those without prior connections to the Rubin project. And it's a great way for newcomers to overcome barriers to entry to Rubin research. So we have an emphasis in this program on really leveling the playing field and making Rubin accessible to researchers from all backgrounds. The program will incentivize institutions that already have well-established Rubin research programs to partner with institutions that are relative newcomers to the Rubin ecosystem, to help lower the barriers to entry, to help them form contacts and networking within Rubin, and to kickstart research programs at newer institutions. So for this, we developed partnership proposal concept, where they will be able to apply for grants with a higher budget limit spread over the participating institutions. Of course, if someone is entirely new to Rubin, then they may not have many connections yet. So to help the formation of these partnerships, we plan to host a Kickstarter workshop in early fall 2020 this year. This is obviously going to be entirely virtual, and we will structure it in such a way that people from different time zones will be able to participate. Now, we'd like to recruit a team of representatives to help us make sure that all elements of this program are as inclusive as possible. Naturally, this should have representatives from all 3 science collaborations to make sure that our different science needs are taken into account. Hopefully, you have already heard about this and have had an opportunity to join this group, and we would very much welcome your input. I hope the task for this group will be impactful, but not take a huge time commitment on their part. They're going to include things like helping us to advertise the program, especially in communities that are underrepresented in astronomy, reviewing the call for proposals to make sure that the call itself follows best practices for encouraging participation, and also to help us recruit members for the resource allocation committee that will actually do the evaluation of the small grants proposals. Now, the timeline for the whole program is necessarily aggressive because the duration of the grant is only 1 year. So we expect to release the call for proposals for small grants towards the end of August, and to hold a Kickstarter workshop soon after that to help us foster project development. Proposals are going to be due round about the end of September, and awards will be made in November for essentially a year's work after that. And we'll ask you to submit a report about what you did at the end of that period. Now, as you all know, we're already working on survey strategy research, and papers can already be contributed to the special edition on a rolling basis. We will be sharing more information shortly about how authors can get reimbursed for any page charges that they are associated with their contributions to that publication. And for TVS and the Stars and Milky Way, the program also provides funds to publish our science roadmap in a refereed journal, thereby giving career credit to everyone who put in actually quite a lot of time to make those roadmaps happen. So those science collaborations will be organising those projects to take place. Now, since the small grant program is a rather unusual opportunity, I thought it would be helpful to go through a few examples of potential proposals, just to illustrate the kind of wide range of things that we would be happy to consider. So the first off is student training. You can imagine a faculty member at a small university has some students around that they would like to provide some training for that perhaps would help them with data analysis in the Rubin environment, for example. That would be a very welcome proposal. Whoops, so try that again. And it would give junior research a lot of opportunity. Faculty summer salary in those institutions where they don't pay their staff year-round, then that is also a possibility in the event that it allows them to focus that time on some LSST themed research. Note that it puts an emphasis on those, or rather, it puts weight towards those proposals which support people who regularly participate and contribute to their science collaborations. I mentioned earlier the joint institutional partnerships, and in this one gives a worked example of how that might work for one institute that maybe has been involved in Rubin research for a while, with another institute that maybe hasn't been previously involved and doesn't have a dedicated grant available for this yet, but has staff that are willing and interested to participate. So this proposal could provide funds at the Newcomer Institute and enable them to really kickstart a whole new program. We also wanted to include some examples of how proposals of this kind could support the actual work of, and structure of the science collaborations themselves. We have a number of people who have been in elected leadership positions and have dedicated a lot of time to the service of the rest of the community, but we haven't until now been able to actually credit them or reward them financially for dedicating that time. And that has really restricted the kind of time that people can dedicate to Rubin research. So this is something that we would like to overcome, and that is definitely a potential small grant concept that we'd like you to consider. We're also very aware that over the last year and a half, especially, everybody's been under unusual stresses, and especially parents and caregivers. And we wanted to make sure that we recognized the impact on all of our members that this can have. So if the small grant concept enables someone to dedicate more time to towards actually doing some research and getting that done, and maybe catching up after some of the impacts after the last year, then that is something that should be considered in the proposals. I already touched on how we're supporting some software services, but equipment and software is a key part of astronomy these days, and so that is absolutely something that you might consider proposing for. And in this case, the example is given of a task force from one of the participating science collaborations apply collectively to get access to a service or facility that they particularly need to accomplish the goals of that task force. So we encourage all of the task forces and all of the groups and the working groups of all of these three science collaborations to consider how maybe applying for a small grant would enhance what you're trying to do with that particular task force. And I mentioned supporting faculty and summer salary, but there are also some researchers who are entirely on soft money, or they're junior researchers. And I wanted to make it clear that we welcome proposals from them as well to allow them to dedicate their time to LSST preparation research. And we did consider a visiting science program, and which one particular small grant concept could be for somebody to actually visit another institution and work with them for a period of time. And this would absolutely be a viable small grant concept proposal. Obviously, at the moment, all travel comes with a bit of an asterisk attached to it because of the pandemic. Yes, in principle, this is a small grant concept we'd like to do. Obviously, we all know that travel restrictions are changing rapidly all of the time. So this is something that you might consider applying for. Bear in mind the potential for the travel restrictions to change. So it pays to have a virtual backup program if this is something you would like to do, but it is something that we would consider. And I wanted to point out that this can also be used to cover training ideas. So for example, to host a bystander intervention training via an online colloquium and make it accessible to all members. One could also imagine organizing software development classes or data analysts. So that's something that perhaps the individual science collaborations or task forces might want to consider. Okay, so that was just a few examples. And I wanted to emphasize that was by no means an exclusive list. That was just a few ideas just to give you a sense of the breadth that we'd like to cover. And so I'd like to wrap up now with the next steps, and then we'll move to Q&A. The first thing to know is that we have a new website for this program, and this will serve as the single point of contact for all information about it. It's obviously developing very rapidly because we only just heard about this. So please keep checking back there for more information, and I will upload the copy of the recording of this presentation, so you will have that available for reference. If you are considering applying for the Small Grants Programme, I strongly encourage you to reach out to your institution's grant office or director and talk it over with them now. One thing we have learned is that some institutions have very particular rules about grant applications, and in particular, they have limits on what overheads may have to be included. So please be aware that the Heisen-Simons Foundation places a strict limit on the maximum overhead that any institution may charge as part of this program. That limit is 15% and it will not be waived or it will not be changed. So I recommend starting that conversation with your institution early so that there are no surprises down the line. I'd also like to ask that all members of all 3 science collaborations please advertise this program. We particularly want to enable participation in Rubin research in communities that are underrepresented in astronomy and maybe haven't had the opportunity yet to get involved. And in order to reach them, we want to take advantage of the global social network that the Rubin science collaborations represent. So please reach out and build partnerships with other institutions in your local region and help us to get the word out. And lastly, don't forget to keep in touch. We only heard about this award very recently, and we are in the process of getting this program ramped up very quickly. So you will be hearing more about it through your science collaborations. So look to them for more information. And I will say thank you very much for your attention, and I will turn it over now to Q&A.
So perhaps I will keep an eye on hands up. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand, ideally virtually. It's too many people to see them all in one screen. Or unmute yourself if you cannot raise your hands. One comment that I wanted to make is that the international eligibility and the flexibility of the foundation also allows us to not to be strict about data rights position for anybody that wants to apply, not any stricter anyways than the constraints of each individual science collaborations on data right position. So some of the science refer to your own science collaboration to see if you can become a science collaboration member, even if depending on what your data right potential in-kind contribution process is or is not. And if your science collaboration allows you as a member, then there is no restriction on allocating these funds, which is markedly different for what it would be if the funds were actually associated to Rubin directly. And also I wanted to point out that there is a bit of a mismatch in the timeline for summer salary, because remember that as per the notes that I've taken, we expect the first report on the grant in June, which is the beginning of the next summer, because the program is so fast paced.
Well, consider in the Northern Hemisphere.
Right, thank you. Northern Hemisphere, exactly. I didn't think about that. So also consider teaching relief, perhaps, if applicable. That tends to be a bit more expensive, so it might not fit in the constraints of the 20 grants, but consider that if possible.
Are there any questions at this point?
Meg.
So you mentioned talking to our grant department. They only care when there's a grant call they can read, because they still usually, at least mine, read it wrong a few times, and then you tell them, I don't think that's quite right, and then they look at it again, and then it's fine.
Yes.
You kind of touched broadly on a timeline. Yeah. Is there any other information you can give of like when you think this call will be actually, like written call will be out? That there, you can set, someone can set eyes on it to then be able to talk to start that process of saying, look, it says 15% overhead, so you can't charge 20 because it says 15.
Yeah, yep.
Kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Point. Yeah, thanks for raising that point. So I have a draft of the call for proposals, which will come as a surprise to everyone else. But I have drafted it, but what I would like is to get the JEDI group, the joint JEDI group together to review the text before it goes out, so that we make sure that we're following best practices to encourage full participation and to make sure that I simply haven't forgotten something critical. So it will go to the chairs of the SC, and I can send that out. Now I've got this presentation done. And once we have the joint group of JEDIs to review it, then honestly, I'm happy to post it online. So although the official timeline for this is to get the proposal call out by the end of August, I would be very happy if that happened earlier, but we need the joint JEDI group in place first. And I think we set a deadline for volunteers of this Friday.
For transparency, and since people may have missed on the JEDI acronym, that's the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group. The JEDI group itself is the TVS, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group, and the joint JEDI group is a group that has the same scope and purpose set up for this call, with joint participation of the science collaborations that are involved.
So I see a question in the chat from Danica. What is the name of the legal entity that is offering the grants? Technically, that would be Las Cumbres Observatory, which is my institution, because the way that the grant has been administrated is that the funds go to a single place, and then that organization disperses the funds to many different institutions as small grants. The reason for doing it that way was simply that the Heising-Simons Foundation itself did not have the logistical capability to disseminate lots and lots of different contracts. Good question, thank you.
So it might be worth pointing out that we expect the proposal call to be, the template for the proposal call to be compact, so that it's not a huge burden on the resource allocation committee. So expect not to have
the proposers.
All the proposers, exactly. So don't expect that you will not have to write a 15-page NSF style proposal that needs to check a lot of boxes. We will not really look for the margins, for the accuracy in the margins of your template or anything like that. It will be, we're going to try to make it as painless as possible.
That's right, and it's going to be of similar size and scope to a typical telescope proposal.
That's right.
It will, a rough idea.
It will require a budget. So if you're at a US institute, I do not know how it works outside, but if you are at a US institute, it will require your research office participation, because you will have to write a detailed budget in the research call. I haven't run that by Rachel, but I feel quite strongly about this.
Yes, you will. That said, it won't be quite as onerous to prepare as a typical US agency budget. It's not going to be that intensive.
Meg.
So you talked about this being very interdisciplinary in terms of an in cross institution. I don't know if you know yet, Rachel, how this would work, but if, say, I come up with a proposal and it has 3 other institutions, and one is a minority serving institute, and we're going to try to set up some internship or something, is it that LCO can do the, I will hand out money sub-award? Rather, you could break up the money and send it around to the different institutions, or do I have to say or worry about one institution receives the money and will make sub-awards? Is that something that LCO would be able to handle, of sending small amounts to these different institutes to, one, help recover, so that we're like, if everyone requires some overhead, they can get it? But if you're sending one check, that it's easier to send it to, say, US institutions from US versus me sending money, say, back, having it go across the Atlantic and back digitally. Is that something, I don't know if you've thought about it yet, but it might be worth thinking about.
So somewhat we have thought about it. And in the case of partnership proposals, obviously, we're expecting to send money to 2 different institutes, possibly more, although the size of the grant is, you can't split it too many ways before you all get like $2, and it's not terribly helpful. So we're expecting to send this to multiple different institutions, and that will be fine. And I don't think you will need to make sub-awards. You can. There is nothing, I think, legally preventing you from doing that, if for some reason that's advantageous.
Keep in mind that sub-awards normally incur double overhead. The overhead would overall be limited to 15%, so it wouldn't suddenly become 30%.
Exactly, which is why sometimes it's easier if it's initially sent separate.
Yes, right. So I see Danica has a second question. Can you confirm grants can go to any country in the world? We can send funds to any country that the US is legally allowed to send funds to. So if you happen to be based in, say, North Korea, probably not. But apart from that, yes. Does anyone have any major concerns about this program? Because now would be a really great time to say something that I didn't think of, or we've forgotten. So to read, thank you for the comments in the chat. Let me go through those. Alessandra says, once the budget is blessed by our budget office, can the submissions be done directly by the proposing scientists rather than our office, like an observing proposal? Yes, absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, I will be in correspondence with the proposing scientists. I know some institutions have feelings about that, and some budget offices require you to go through the institution. If that is necessary, so be it. But personally, I prefer to work with the scientists involved in the actual work. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it comes from you.
Actually, maybe worth pointing out, we also don't have restriction on who can PI a grant. Sometimes your university might have restrictions on who can PI a grant, but they tend to be fairly liberal if the grant comes from a foundation. So when you talk to your research office, maybe indicate that. Meaning who can PI with respect to what the role in their institution is. I think we wouldn't have a problem in principle awarding it to a postdoc or a student for sure.
Yep, absolutely. That's no problem for us, but again, talk to your own institution.
Rachel, definitely an interesting question in the chat. Will this program be a recurring or yeah?
So far, it is a one-year program. I think the way we approached the foundation, it came out of the blue for them, and it happened to dovetail very nicely with their current goals. And so that's why it is limited in scope, and that's why the duration is what it is. We hope that it will be a pathfinder and set a precedence for science collaborations to get funding for those that don't have it. One thing that we did run into is that there's an awful lot of perception out there among funding agency type bodies, is that they assume that Rubin preparatory research is funded. And that is a widespread assumption despite concerted efforts, especially by Federica, to correct that assumption.
We literally wrote a paper about it. I don't know what else we can do.
So we have corrected that impression at one founding agency, but to get this program to be reoccurring, that's something we'd love to do, and it's a work in progress. So I know both ourselves and LSSTC are trying to make progress on that one.
I also want to say that I think the pressure maybe is on you all, right? If we do wonderful things with this one-year grant, then we probably stand in a much better position to have it renewed and expanded. So I would say the pressure is on you all to propose and accomplish great things with it.
Yes, very much so. Alessandra, thank you for the comment. It has been very much on our mind that we wanted to enable everybody to recover from the pandemic as fast as possible. So, yes. Does anyone have any concepts for proposals that they would like to throw out there?
That would actually be particularly useful as we put examples on the webpage if we forgot any areas or any overall project ideas, project families that we might have forgotten.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, that's a great suggestion, Meg.
Yeah.
So Meg is suggesting that we set up some breakout rooms and let people brainstorm in smaller groups. I'm very keen on that.
I agree.
5 seconds for one last urgent question. If you have been shy so far and didn't feel like asking it, but really want to. 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I have the power to make the breakout rooms. And there are 40 people here, so I will make 15 rooms, something like that.
15?
And you would be too many?
40 people? Yeah, I would say probably. I'm thinking more sort of 4 or 5.
Oh, yeah. How many? Sorry.
4 or 5 maybe?
Yeah, and actually people might be streaming guys. But I'll make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I clicked on 6. I'll make 6. I'll assign automatically, and off you go.
Okay, see you later.
That's so unbalanced. How did it go? I think we're all back.
Hopefully everybody had a productive discussion.
Brilliant. I'll let you wrap it up, Rachel.
I'm glad. I hope that everybody's saying I'm getting thumbs up. So good. I'm glad everybody had an interesting discussion. I hope you'll be really creative and active about putting in proposals for this, because as I want to reinforce what Fed said earlier, and that the more successful we make this, the more impactful in terms of papers and community and bringing new people into Rubin research, the better, because the more likely we are to be able to offer this kind of opportunity in the future. So look out for more news soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Rachel.
Spearheaded
Thank you.
the massive.
Bye.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sorry, I should have left a couple of minutes to actually emphasize how masterful your leadership on this was.
That's very kind of you. I see it definitely as a team effort. And you were the inspiration for it from the beginning.
Some team members have worked harder than others, and I'm thinking one in particular.
Well, thank you. I'm just super excited that we're able to do this at last.
As you were talking, I got a little bit, I'm going to stop the recording.